Yeah. Okay, great. Very full screen. Welcome, everybody. Uh, Welcome to all. My name is Pat Willer. I'm the Douglas County Chair. I know a lot of you, but not all of you, and I am always excited to see new people here. So thank you very much for joining us on a very sunny, still kind of chilly, it's very white Saturday morning. Our meeting today, our Saturday seminar, is a monthly meeting. We sometimes do it virtually and sometimes do it live, but we have been flexible. I am very pleased to announce that we have sponsors that will be covering us for the next few months, and would like to thank the sponsorship of Mark and Jeannie Cottrell, Lois Orth Lopes and Steve Lopes, Jim and Lena Carter Brook, and Kurt and Marilyn Hall. So we appreciate these sponsors for their commitment and their generosity. And I'll have you know, we're going to need it because we're going back to the Lawrence Arts Center in March. So more about that in a few minutes. Today's speaker will be Reverend Mark Holland. He's the Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate, challenging Jerry Moran. I'll tell you a little bit more about Mark, and you'll hear at length from him. But I have a few announcements first. So let's get to those. I want to thank, first of all, everybody who participated in Party Blue. We had a great team of people that worked on it. We had good Democrats who donated items. We had good Democrats who bid on items for the auction. We had good speakers that our candidates were there. Governor Kelly joined us. Great keynote speech from another good Democrat, Kevin Wilmot, the filmmaker and activist, and we had a great time. We met our fundraising goals, and that's important because March is coming, and it's time that we get to be focused on electing Democrats and fighting the anti-abortion amendment on the primary ballot. So we got a lot of good work set up ahead, and we now have the ability to get going on that. So for my announcements, I am very pleased to announce that we have a new headquarters and we will be opening in March. Our location is 2700 West 6th Street in Lawrence, Suite B. This is just off of 6th Street in a group of offices. Used to be Stevens Real Estate, if anybody knows where that is, just a little bit west of Iowa Street, and good parking, handicapped access, very nice facility. So we are very excited about it. It certainly will be a reason to celebrate, and we'll figure that out. But first we have to get moved in. So first things first. I have a few other announcements. This afternoon, there's a training session for the campaign to fight the anti-abortion amendment, which, as many of you know, will be on the primary ballot in August. This session will be for people who want to get involved in actively working to stop the abortion amendment or the anti-abortion amendment. It will be held at 1 p.m. today at the Lawrence Public Library. Hi. Lawrence Public Library, and it can also be accessed virtually. And I think Amy may have just put that in our links, our chat. So you have a link for the virtual access. Special shout out to, yeah, there it is. Special shout out to Amy Castle and Suzanne Griffith, who are both, I think, on the call today. They have agreed to serve on the steering committee for the Kansans for Constitutional Freedom, which is a coalition of organizations of which we are part of through our membership in the Kansas Democratic Party. Amy and Suzanne are going to lead the way for us to figure out how we can effectively help. They'll be working closely with the rest of our people involved in voter engagement and our volunteers. So if you are interested in the meeting today, attend via virtually. And if you're interested in being a volunteer to work on this, you can contact me or Amy or Suzanne, okay? Other thing we have is the Kansas Democratic Party will hold its annual meeting Washington Days next Friday and Saturday, but primarily Saturday, February 26th at the Ramada Inn in Topeka. This will be an in-person event. There is no charge to attend. There are charges to attend the lunch and dinner. Further information will be on the Kansas Democratic Party website. I think that's going to go up in our chat as well for access. I do have somebody who is looking for a ride to attend the afternoon meetings. So if you are planning to attend and would be willing to give another Democrat a ride, if you could contact me, I would appreciate it. I believe the event does require proof of vaccination, and it also can be, some of it at least will be able to be accessed virtually. New events coming up for us. Next happy hour will be March 7, Monday, March 7, 5:30 to 6:30, virtually through Zoom. So we will be Zooming on Monday, March 7th. We hope to resume in-person outdoor happy hours in April. That, of course, is going to be COVID dependent, but things do tend to be, they're looking good. And we hope to be back this spring, out at least outdoors for happy hour. So stay tuned. I do have an opening for people to be involved in coordinating the happy hour. It's a happy job. Doesn't involve a lot of work, but if you're interested in helping out with that, that would be fabulous. And as we do kind of re-enter the real world of happy hour rather than the virtual world, it should be a fun time to be working on this. So give me a holler. Our March Saturday seminar will be held at the Lawrence Arts Center on Saturday, March 19th, 9:30 for networking and 10 a.m. for the beginning of the meeting. Proof of vaccination is required. A couple of people have asked me, they've already shown their vaccination, and we are in fact keeping a record of who we have, received proof of vaccination from, so that when we are hosting events, you don't have to do it every time. Once you've had a vaccine, it counts. It doesn't go away. So if you've already provided proof of vaccine, don't worry about it. If not, when you come on Saturday, March 19th, please bring your card with you. And it will be so great to be back together again. Before we move to our program, I do want to say we are so grateful for our elected officials. Those Democratic leaders in Douglas County have worked hard and selflessly, endured a lot, and they continue to inspire us with their leadership in tough, tough times. I know that a few of them are here today, and you know how Zoom land works. It's always hard to know exactly who's here. So I'm going to give a shout out to who I think is here, and then we'll give a collective shout out to all. But I believe Senator Marcy Francisco, Representative Boog Heiberger, School Board Member Carol Cadu Blackwood, and City Commissioner of Lawrence, Lisa Larson, are here today. We thank them very much for their attendance. We look forward to actually being able to be with them next month at the Lawrence Arts Center. And in the meantime, a shout out to all. So we can't really shout, so just wave your hands. Okay, fabulous. Now we turn to today's program. Mark Holland, candidate for U.S. Senate, is a worthy challenger to Jerry Moran, who has voted against all the recovery legislation, is on the record opposing the voter protection laws that could be enacted if only they would be given consideration in the Senate. Mark is a United Methodist minister, former mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, who has dedicated his life to public service and to other people. I think you'll find that the contrast between Jerry Moran and Mark Holland is a very stark contrast. And I'm very happy that Mark has taken up the challenge of running, and he's got a plan to win. He is a strong advocate for supporting real wages for working people, funding rural and urban healthcare and hospitals, and protecting our public schools. Mark will speak now and will also answer questions that you would put in the chat after his remarks. So Mark, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank everyone for coming out on this Saturday morning. Can you all hear me okay? That's my first question to make sure that's clear. Hearing's more important than seeing because this is all I got to work with. So as long as you can hear, we're in good shape. I'm going to share a couple things. One, I want to introduce Brandy Fisher, who is my interim campaign manager. Brandy has worked with Mainstream Coalition and has a ton of experience in grassroots networking, which is really her passion and my passion and where we want to focus and will be focusing our campaign. And if you have outreach to the campaign that you want, and we can put this in the, I think Brandy can put this in the chat for us. Brandy's email is a little faster to getting a hold of the campaign. But we're glad to get on calls and go places. So we're all in on this campaign, and we're working very hard to get out to talk to as many groups as we can. And I appreciate what you're doing. So I'm going to give you a couple things. One, I'll share a little more about my background, a little bit about my values and my issues of why I'm running, and then talk strategy, because I think it's important. And the number one question I very seldom get from Democrats a question about, well, is Jerry doing a pretty good job? No one ever says that. What people do say is, how can we possibly beat him in Kansas? And so I'm going to spend some time on that as well. So I'll start off again. Pat gave a nice introduction. I am a third generation United Methodist pastor in Kansas, fourth generation Wyandotte County Union Democrat. I have been served my first churches in Wathena and Elwood in rural Kansas, in two small towns whose combined population was smaller than the high school I attended. So I'm a city kid and not going to fool anybody in that respect, and really needing to work with others for my outreach to the rest of the community. I did grow up in Kansas City and Topeka. My dad, as a pastor, moved back and forth quite a bit. And so I grew up in different communities, but mostly in the city and mostly in the Northeast. So that's a big part of my story. I'm also, when I heard the call, I tell folks I heard the call to ministry when I was 14 in a church meeting, ironically. Most people lose their religion in a church meeting, and I actually heard my calling there. And then I went through high school, college, and seminary with the intent of being a pastor. And when I was serving in Kansas City, Kansas, I served 19 years at Trinity United Methodist in KCK. And I heard the call to public service. And I ran for office and served on the Unified Government Commission, and then served as mayor. The last 3 years, I've been working. I co-founded an organization called Mainstream UMC, which is a global advocacy group within the denomination to advocate for LGBTQ ordination and marriage within the denomination. It's a long, interesting story why the United Methodist Church is behind the Presbyterians, Lutherans, and Episcopalians in this respect, but a conversation for another day. But that's the work I've been doing for the last several years. And I got into this race. I thought about it. I called around to see who was going to run against Jerry Moran. I called Barbara Bollier first. I was so excited about her candidacy, and I thought she ran a very credible race and really kind of changed the way we think about races. She was not going to run again. And so as I was thinking about this, January 6th happened. And I remember watching on television with horror what the culmination of lies, conspiracy theories, and enabling had happened. This outburst was a huge part of just enabling. And after January 6th, of course, Jerry Moran voted to not to acquit Donald Trump again for impeachment, and he voted to not investigate January 6th, and then within a week of that, asked for Donald Trump's endorsement. And as I've said to many people, I'm not sure I know how to spell quid pro quo, but I'm pretty sure that's what it looks like. And Jerry Moran that really epitomizes Jerry Moran's 20 years in Washington, D.C. He stands for nothing except re-election. He's not willing to take a stand on issues. And here's the reality. If you can't stand up for our democracy, you've ceded the right to serve Kansas in the U.S. Senate. And I think that's, for me, was the bottom line in terms of the final push kind of for me to jump into this race, and then to take on an uphill climb. So my values that I bring to this, and actually I'm getting ready to add a whole, it's funny how long it takes to articulate all these pieces, but this will be added to my website very soon. And if I glance this way, it's because my other screen is over here. And so I can read my notes over here. But one of the biggest pieces is civil discourse. I mean, one of the things that's happened in this country is the complete decline in civil discourse. Yes, you have a right to be a jerk on Facebook. We also have a responsibility to be civil. And the rights without responsibility is a downward spiral. I also, what happened to telling the truth? I don't think I think we all learned in school, in kindergarten, either in kindergarten or Sunday school or both, the value of telling the truth. I actually learned about this because my mom was a teacher at my school and my dad was the preacher at my church, and there was nowhere to go. So I learned a lot about telling the truth and accountability early on. I never thought that was fair, but you learn quickly. But this whole idea that you can take, and out of this lying have come these conspiracy theories, and any good conspiracy theory has an ounce of truth and wrapped in a pound of lies. And we have to push through the conspiracy theories, because I have not seen in my lifetime a time when conspiracy theories and lying were such a threat to the very fabric of our society. And certainly we've seen the threat to our democracy, but a threat to what's holding us together. When you have people living on alternative facts that are made up out of whole cloth, we have a dangerous environment in our country. So it seems like telling the truth shouldn't be a value that we have to push, but it's a baseline we need to get back to. The other piece is solving problems. As mayor, our mayor offices, and it's true across the state, are nonpartisan. So you end up working with people with whom you disagree. And in Wyandotte, and it's probably true in Douglas too, everybody's registered a Democrat, whether they are or not, right? Because they want to make sure people don't call them out for not being a Democrat. Whereas in other parts of the state, everyone's registered a Republican, whether they are or not, right? So you can vote in the primaries. So you serve in local office, you serve with people with whom you don't agree, and you solve problems. There's no Democrat or Republican way to pave a street. You just have to get the job done. And problem solving has gone away. And now what we have is an entire party committed to dysfunction and to sabotage, and is not willing to work to solve problems. Jerry Moran, again, another example. He helped negotiate that bipartisan infrastructure bill. And one message from Trump saying he didn't want it, and he folds up like a lawn chair at a church picnic. And he votes against his own bill because he doesn't have the courage to stand up. $3.8 billion in infrastructure to Kansas jobs, to the Kansas economy, and he votes against it for political spite. And now he's out and about bragging about the benefits it's bringing to Kansas, which there's no shame, there's no blinking, there's nothing. It's just, this is just what politics have become, and we come to expect it and accept it. And it shouldn't be tolerated. Finally, breaking down these false dichotomies. This is a big piece. We can help our environment and create jobs. The idea that it's either jobs or the environment is a false dichotomy. We know that the green industry is bringing great new jobs. I was just in a county in Cherokee County in Southeast Kansas, where the county commissioners actually voted to ban windmill production and windmill installation in their county. Well, that's genius. They're saying, we don't want any new jobs. We don't want any new investment. We don't care about the environment. We're going to get involved in a culture war rather than get involved in growing our economy. And that's the kind of, that's where we're at. It is, yes, anyone who, we can reduce abortions and protect a woman's right to choose. But we're going to reduce abortion by providing access to healthcare and access to birth control. And many of the same people who are against abortion are against birth control, which I don't get. So there are these false dichotomies that have been set up, are damaging our country. So those are the big kind of values that I lead with and really want to push. The other thing, just the issues. Healthcare is critical. The expansion of Medicaid, and Jerry Moran has voted against every form of healthcare that he could. to involve in a culture war about, I don't know how voting against healthcare became a culture war issue, but forget for a minute that hospitals save lives. Okay, let's just pretend they don't. Let's just forget about that. And let's look at hospitals as job creators. A hospital in a community is an enormous economic engine. Doctors, nurses, administrators, custodians, cafeteria workers, groundskeepers. You think about the number of jobs created and the ancillary economic impact of that kind of job center on a community. When you're voting against healthcare, you're closing hospitals across Kansas. And this is one of the pieces that I feel passionately about coming from Wyandotte. I've seen our city depopulate. I've seen businesses close. I've seen the hospital I was born in torn down, the elementary school I went to torn down. I've seen the impact of the loss of institutions and the loss of investment on our city. Wyandotte County from 1970 to 2000 had a net loss of 30,000 people. 30,000 people left 10,000 empty homes, which have become 6,000 vacant lots and 4,000 blighted properties. When we started looking at when the government unified to recreate a new opportunity for Wyandotte County, the idea was not that we're going to go back to the 1950s to what Wyandotte used to be. The idea was to look forward to what it could be. And this is true in many of our communities across Kansas. If we're going to rebuild the economy in many of our communities, there are no jobs from the past. Every job is in the future, and it's in new technologies, new industries, new opportunities. My bishop, and I feel my good friend Rick's Presbyterian pastor, and he doesn't get to have bishops like the Methodists do. But one of our bishops was fond of saying there are 700 United Methodist churches in Kansas, one in every single small town. 700 United Methodist churches, and he was very fond of saying the United Methodist Church in Kansas is perfectly positioned for ministry and mission in the unlikely event that the 1950s come back. I think we have a lot of our communities, a lot of people, an entire party that's waiting for the 1950s to come back and is looking backwards rather than forward. And that forward-looking piece, and I think that's what this election about. I don't think it's about liberal conservative. I think it's about forward-looking and backward-looking. We need to invest in the future, and the future comes through healthcare. The future comes through investing in education. The future comes through investing in new industries. So that's a big part of my issues. So, and I can answer more questions if you have questions about particular issues. The last thing I'll say about issues, because I always get asked this, so I'll just share this first. As a pastor, I also think it's important that we push back on a whole group of Christians who believe that their views are the only ones that matter. And I also think that they claim that Christians or good people only think this way. And I just want to say we need to push back against that. I believe in the separation of church and state, and I believe in the values that I just talked about, which I think are American values and Kansas values. I would also say, as a person of faith, it's important for me to say a woman's right to choose is a moral issue also, and we need to stand up boldly and defend that right. So that's important to me. The other piece that I'll say, how do we win this? So there's 105 counties in Kansas. You all know most of this, so I'll just give us a review. 105 counties in Kansas. 5 counties have half the population. The next 5 counties get us to 2/3 of the population. The remaining 95 counties have 1/3 of the population. You'll be surprised to know we Democrats lose badly in the rural communities, sometimes 85-15. And one of the keys to this election and to every election it's what Stacey Abrams talked about in Georgia, and I've read a lot of her work, is we have to be willing to lose less badly in the rural communities. We can't lose 85-15. We're going to lose, but we can lose 70-30. We can lose 65-35. If we can get our voters out, and there's a lot of, there's some great articles that have been out about Democrats in rural communities not willing to put up yard signs, taking bumper stickers off their cars, afraid to, there's so much hostility right now and so much demonizing of Democrats that folks are embarrassed to even share their views. We need to be able to empower our Democrats in our rural communities to get out those votes. The other piece is Laura Kelly won 4 years ago, her governor's race, winning only 9 counties out of 105. She won the most populous counties. And the key to our winning is going to be to winning the largest counties, losing less badly in the rural communities. How do we do that? Well, Laura Kelly won by 19,000 votes. There are 75,000 Democrats in Kansas, 75,000 Democrats in Kansas who voted in the presidential race who did not vote in the governor's race. Those low propensity voters are the key, and Stacey Abrams will tell you this over and over again. Low propensity Democratic voters are the key to winning elections. 75,000 votes, that's nearly 4 times Laura Kelly's margin of victory from 4 years ago. That's a lot of votes. Those are just Democrats. That's not anybody else. The Democrats alone hold enough low propensity voters for 4 times Laura Kelly's margin of error. We need to get those Democrats back to the polls. And this is the low hanging fruit. They're already registered. They already know where their polling place is. They've already pulled the lever once or pushed the button or whatever. We still say we're dialing our phone, but we're not. But they've already voted, right? So we have folks, we don't have to register. We don't have to tell them where the polling place is. We don't have to, they've already shown a capacity to get to the poll. But these are folks, and I'll describe it like this. It's kind of like getting my daughter to watch a football game. My daughter's 16. She loves basketball. She loves her some TikTok, but football's not really on her list of top 20 things she wants to do in an afternoon. So if you want to get her to watch a football game, you have to provide chips and salsa, right? It helps to provide another disinterested party for her to talk with during the game, right? That's helpful. But she already has Chiefs stuff. Like if we get her in front of the television, she'll wear her Chiefs shirt and she'll even cheer for the right team, right? She's not going to cheer for the Raiders. She wouldn't do that in our house. But you have to get her there. She's not a bad person. It's not on her list. These are low propensity voters. And if you ask low propensity voters, do you vote? They'll say, yeah, I vote every time. What they mean is every presidential time, because it's like the Super Bowl of voting. They don't watch the playoffs. They don't go to the regular season. So in Wyandotte County, there are 80,000 registered voters. 26,000 show up to vote for president, which is terrible turnout. If you want the high propensity voters, the people who vote in every local election, primary and general local election, that's a universe of about 8,000 people in Wyandotte. When you're running for mayor, that is the group that you mail to. That's the group that you reach out to because you know they're coming to the polls and you need to make sure they vote for you. The common thinking has always been you go after the high turnout voters. Here's what we know about high turnout voters. They show up on Zoom meetings at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Okay. I don't call those folks voters. I call them donors. You know what I'm saying? These are the folks that we need help from. These are folks who are tuned in, who get it, who are passionate about it, but it's a small universe and we need to get the larger group to come to the polls. They already share democratic values. We don't have to convince them that abortion is a woman's choice. We don't have to convince them that the environment matters. We don't have to convince them about the importance of healthcare and public education. They already share our values. They're just not tuned in. That's for me. I'll get that later. We just have to get them to the polls. That's where relational organizing comes in. That's where the grassroots work goes. That's where Brandy's expertise comes in, of organizing people. We need in Douglas County alone, Douglas County, 29,000 people voted in the presidential, 25,000 people voted in the governor's races. You have a delta of 4,200 people who voted presidential and not general. If you can bring those 4,200 people to the polls, we can win this. The other thing that's very helpful when I go to talk to Allen County with Iola, it's a very rural community. When I talk to them and say, here's our win in Iola, I need you to get these 204 voters to the polls. If you can get 204 extra people to the polls in Allen County, that's winning. If I told Allen County, you've got to flip this for blue, they'd look at me cross-eyed. They're like, are you kidding? Have you ever been here? The answer is yes, I have been there, but we're not going to flip it blue. But if they get their low propensity voters there, we have an opportunity to win this race statewide. But we need every county getting low propensity voters there. So that's my hope for Douglas County, is you get your 4,200 low propensity voters, Democrats, to the polls. And then it's my job to appeal to the independents. It's my job to, or the unaffiliated. It's my job to appeal to the moderate Republicans and not sound like a wingnut, right? Which is a daily goal, right? Not to sound like a wingnut. So this is the job of the candidates, is to convince the moderates and the unaffiliateds. It's the job of the Democrats. This is my view. It's the job of the Democrats to get Democrats to vote. And if we can't get Democrats to vote after January 6th, we can't get Democrats to vote. So that's our task. So I'll stop there. As you can see, I can fill any amount of airtime. So I will stop and take questions. Any thoughts?
I am unmuted. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mark, we do have some questions, and let me check in the chat first. And there I am seeing your contact information, which is important. Does anyone have a question for Mark? Well, I guess you answered all the questions.
Well, everyone knows how much I talk, so they're afraid to ask another question and get me talking again. I mean,
no.
I have a question.
Go for it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Margaret Lamar. And my suggestion for you and all Democratic candidates this election cycle is please do not hesitate in your campaign literature, on the stump, to align Moran with the January 6th insurrection. I mean, pictures of that guy, the shaman, the people storming the Capitol, the people being very disruptive and violent. I think that most Kansans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, across the line, there are very few, hardcore Trumpers who are going to say that's political discourse. But I think that the average Kansan has the decency to be absolutely appalled by what happened on January the 6th. And so I would link Moran with that incident to the hilt, so that there is no doubt or no question in anyone's mind. He essentially stands with them.
What pictures?
Yeah, pictures of all those people storming the Capitol and all of their Confederate signs and the Nazi T-shirt, the works.
Show a picture of that and Moran next to it.
Right. Most Kansans are very repulsed by that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark?
Well, I do think here's the thing. This is what I hear a lot. People say, oh, Jerry's a super nice guy. I knew him back in the day. I don't know if you all know this. You all live in Lawrence. Did you know Kansas University has a football team? They do, actually. And they fire a nice guy every 2 or 3 years because you don't get to be a football coach for being a nice guy. You get for winning football games, right? Jerry Moran might be a very nice guy, but his voting record for Kansas is abysmal. And his voting record standing up for democracy is abysmal. His enabling what's happening with the lies and the conspiracy theories is abysmal. And he needs to be held accountable for that. And his role, he's not the Josh Hawley out there raising his fist, and he doesn't have the same verbal incontinence of Roger Marshall, right? But he does have the same, he's more interested in re-election than in doing the right thing. Mike Pence, you'll be surprised to know I didn't vote for Mike Pence as vice president. They were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Once the election's over, Mike Pence is my vice president, right? He's not even a part of my party, but he's my vice president. They're chanting, "Hang my vice president," with a Trump sign. That's their party ticket. And Jerry Moran doesn't have the courage to call Donald Trump out for that. He doesn't have the courage to investigate that. He's not concerned about people trying to hang a member of his own party, a member of his own country. It's outrageous. And his silence is an embarrassment. And I think he needs to be held accountable for that. So I agree that we can't let him off the hook just because he doesn't say every stupid thing that pops into his head. We do have to hold him accountable for because what he's not done has been as abysmal as what he has done. And he needs to be held accountable for that. Someone did ask, I see in the chat, someone asked if there's another Dem in the primary. There are two other people who have filed. One is a Republican, Mike Sudert, who has a very entertaining, wacky website. He's not filing financial reports or raising money. He's a foil from the Republicans. There's another gentleman who has filed who has not stood up a website or raised any money. So in terms of active campaigns, I'm the only active campaign for this position. How am I going to connect with rural voters is another piece. I am a city kid. There's no fooling. The key for that for me is I'm really leaning into, and I've had some pushback on it, but took a chapter out of Raphael Warnock's playbook. I'm using Reverend on my logo and leaning heavily into my role as a United Methodist pastor. It gives me a natural entree into a lot of communities because every community has a United Methodist church. And it turns out United Methodists are pretty normal people, right? So, I mean, there are notable exceptions, but basically we're basically a normal group. I think that gives me an entree into a lot of communities to show that, look, Democrats don't have horns coming out of our heads. We're good, faithful people, and we have some values that if we could talk about them, probably most of our values we have in common. And I've been out in a lot of rural churches in Kansas and across the country talking about LGBTQ inclusion. And the reality is, people who know someone who's gay, the bias goes away because relationship matters. People who are in relationship in their communities with people of color have less racism. Communities that have a lot of immigration hate immigrants less. I think there's just a relationship matters. And if I can lean into the relationship of being United Methodist, because if you're in a small town, somebody that's United Methodist. I'll bet in Lawrence, somebody that's United Methodist. That there is there's an opportunity to lean into that relationship as an entree that I think matters. So that's something that's important to me. Now, I also am forming a rural cabinet of folks who are going to help coach me in that respect. I love it after church. This happens after church sometimes. After a particularly interesting sermon, people will say, someone invariably will come up and say, Pastor, what you don't understand is, and I always like to stop and say, look, what I don't understand will fill the ocean. We really don't have time to go through everything I don't understand. But knowing what you don't know matters. And I need rural folks to help coach me on what I don't know, because we all have blind spots. I think my message is going to resonate pretty well in Wyandotte, Johnson, Douglas, probably Topeka, probably much of Sedgwick. But it is true, once we get out into more rural areas, that's where I need help from people who live there. And that's where relational organizing comes in, because it's much better for people in Allen County to ask Allen County to vote than someone from the city coming to ask people to vote, right? Douglas County residents are going to respond better to Douglas County Democrats asking them to vote than someone from Wyandotte or someone from Johnson, right? It's just more effective. Relational organizing is about people with the relationships connecting with people. The thing about your people too, the 4,200 votes we need, I'll print out, or not print, we don't print anything anymore, but I will give you the file of the names and contact information of those low propensity voters so you can contact them directly. You don't have to guess who they are, but those should be the first people we reach out to.
Okay, good. I want to say, and I think I think she is also a rural voter, but one of our wonderful Democrats, MJ Bruin, Maryland, has said, I like what you have to say and the way you say it. I will do what I can to help your campaign. So
Hooray.
There you go. And she's somebody who we count on. Let's see, got another one here from Senator Marcy Francisco. To everyone, I'm hoping you will consider supporting local control with regard to the development of renewable resources. As we've seen in Douglas County during the Planning Commission deliberations, there are a lot of things to consider, and living close to wind turbines does have some drawbacks. So I'll let you comment. That's one of those tough questions you can practice on us Democrats.
Well, I can tell you what, I can tell you straight up, local control, by the way, is in the Kansas Constitution. And the people in Topeka who like federal overreach the least love state overreach the most. Can I just say, they want the Kansas legislature to control the gun laws in every community. They want the Kansas legislature to control, because they're in charge of it. This is what you want: local control when you're not in charge. You want, so it's completely two-faced. And this is, again, people will talk out of both sides of their mouth and not even blink. I think the local control is big. I think there's a role for local control with even guns. If you live in Wyandotte, the idea, one, of defunding the police is crazy talk. We do need to hold police accountable, and I've done that. I can talk some about that. But we also know that everyone walking up and down the street with a gun is bad for Kansas City, Kansas. If you live out in a rural town and there's 600 people in your town and everybody knows everybody, and you want to carry your guns around, look, I don't care. That doesn't hurt us. But having local communities being able, well, Douglas County has a university here. You should be able to make decisions about what guns there are. And the legislature forcing guns on every campus, school campus, university campus, is completely unacceptable. So there needs to be local control. I think would go a long way toward addressing, or the way I would say it, city people don't need to tell country people what to do with their guns, but the corollary is also true. Country folks shouldn't tell city people how to handle guns. We like policing funded at the local level. Public safety happens at the local level. And I think the local communities should have more autonomy to make decisions about those kinds of things. And that sparks passion on all kinds of sides, but I do think that it's an example of local control. And the issue around renewables, I do know Board of Public Utilities in Wyandotte bought all of the electricity from your renewable hydroelectric plant. So we appreciate that.
Good.
My computer's being powered by Lawrence and renewable electricity right now.
And we're proud to do it.
That's right.
I have a question from William Snavely. Jerry Moran is very focused on supporting the military. Are you going to bother to reach out to those folks during your campaign?
No, absolutely. I think we reach out to everyone. And I will say, Riley County went blue in the last presidential election. Gary County was not far behind. So there's opportunity there in those communities. I would say Donald Trump did a lot to burn bridges with the military. Well, he burned bridges with everybody, and somehow he still gets a lot of votes. But I do think we shouldn't count out any group for this or that. I do think we absolutely need to reach out to the military community, particularly in those communities where there's a strong presence. I think that matters.
Okay. Martha Kaufman has an interesting question. Can Mark discuss his views regarding the Ukraine crisis involving the threat from Russia? Does he have a position regarding President Biden's handling of these issues?
Well, I mean, I have an opinion about it. I do think President Biden's doing a good job with a pretty balanced response. I mean, he's not prepared to send U.S. troops to fight Russian troops. That's good. He's standing by NATO. I think that's good. I do think that, this is a whole piece of getting back to what's real. Jerry Moran stood idly by while the president of his party actively aided and abetted dictators around the world. Donald Trump loves dictators. He wants to be one. He loves Putin. He loves the idea of two guys running the world, and I think Biden's piece of engaging the allies in Europe, not burning bridges with our own allies, this whole idea of it's not even really America first, it's America only, that somehow we're going to be these mavericks that are going to do all of our own thing. Donald Trump did more to burn bridges with our allies than anyone. The Russian crisis, the Ukrainian crisis is going to be dealt with on the global stage and not in Washington, D.C. So I think Joe Biden's doing a much better job. Obviously, he's a credible adult in the room, and I'm grateful for that. And he has advisors that he's listening to. So I think there's a much better opportunity of dissuading it. But I do think the key is working with our allies in the region, and doing accountability and looking at sanctions. If Donald Trump were president right now, he'd be cheering Putin, right? And he'd be thinking, I wonder if we can get Canada, right? I wonder if the truckers will just take Canada for us. Maybe we can expand our territory too. I mean, the guy's, the guy. I mean, I don't have to say anything.
Okay, I see from Lois Orth Lopes, huge shout out, rural cabinet, great idea, great. Question from Daryl Jones, or comment, we have some very good ideas and strategies. Thanks for coming and speaking. I have a question, and it's not in chat, so I'll throw it out. But if you are our next senator in Washington, what are your top priorities? What are we going to most count on you for?
Well, the first thing we can do is we need to stop the attack on our elections. We need to get to, I think election integrity is big. Jerry Moran in 2006 was all for voting rights. The wind's blowing a different direction right now, so now he's not for voting rights. I think that's pretty outrageous. I think the gerrymandering, cutting Wyandotte County in half to cut up racial, a county that's majority minority, in order to dilute the vote is outrageous. It's a violation of the Voting Act. So I think the first thing we can see is some return to some voting security and voting access. I think the other piece is tamping down this culture war. I think we need to, the leader of the Kansas delegation right now is Roger Marshall. Roger Marshall is leading the Kansas delegation. He's our junior senator. He's the most vocal voice. He's an embarrassment. And he's leading in all the wrong directions. We need a voice in Washington, D.C. that's reasonable, that is not working on culture war issues, but is working on problem solving and is holding people accountable for getting things done. So I think those are my first priorities that we can get to. The other thing, I believe that one of the reasons our government is in such a toxic mess, I think we need term limits. And this isn't a super high polling issue that everybody loves, term limits. Jerry Moran's been in DC for 20 years. Has it gotten better? Are we more proud of DC or less proud of DC after his 20 years of leadership there? That's a key piece that I think we need to address, our term limits for Congress. I also think we need to think about, reasonable government, a reasonable voice, solving problems, working on things like infrastructure, working on things that we can agree on, protecting the integrity of voting. I think those are things that I'm going to do straight out that I think are critical.
Okay, all right. As a follow-up to that, I'll take Karen Barrett's question. Can you talk more about healthcare? Would you support universal healthcare with a single-payer system?
Well, I think that everyone knows the most efficient system is a single-payer system, right? If we're going to lower costs and have the most effective system, a single-payer system is statistically the most beneficial. One of the things that we really have to help people with, and a lot of it is education, is helping Kansans who continue to elect people to Topeka who are working against their own best interest in terms of healthcare. We have, not expanding Medicaid, a 9-to-1 federal match for money is crazy. So the first thing I would do for healthcare is allow the expansion of Medicaid without the states being able to block it. There's the whole Kansas Health Association, the Hospital Association, everyone is advocating for expansion of Medicaid, and allowing culture warriors to stand in the way of people are literally dying for lack of healthcare. I think is key. So pushing, I think we need to continue to reform our healthcare. I think we need to continue to reform it. If we sat down and actually talked about the problem of access to healthcare and costs, there are solutions out there. The single payer system is one solution, but there are 50 solutions that improve things. Prescription drug costs, that's a solution. Allowing allowing the federal government to negotiate senior costs for drugs. I mean, that's just a quid pro quo for the pharmaceutical companies. That has nothing to do with what's good for healthcare. So if we started talking about what's good for healthcare instead of just what's good for healthcare PACs, I think we'd be a lot further down the road. So I would be open to it because it's a solution. I think there are a lot of solutions. There's a lot of small steps we could take on the way to that would improve healthcare for a lot of people and reduce our costs.
Okay. Mark, we are coming up on 11 o'clock, 5 minutes from now, but I've got some good questions still out here. Can you go over a little bit?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This is what I do for a living right now.
All right. Well, then this is one, and I got to quote the Beatles on this. We're back in the USSR, but Karen Heinzen has a question. I couldn't resist. Sorry.
I'm all good.
Karen Heinzen has a question. Jerry Moran went to Russia on July 4th with other senators several years ago. We need to know why. Will you ask him during a debate?
I would bet you dollars to donuts. And I don't really know where that phrase comes from or what it means, but my mom uses it a lot, so I do too. I bet you dollars to donuts he will not debate me. He has he has nothing to gain. He has a statistical lead. He has a higher voter registration. He has an R next to his name in Kansas. He has nothing to gain by debating. So I would bet, unless I don't know what kind of pressure could be brought to bear to force him to debate. And as my kids say, the only thing I'm good at maybe is talking. So I would be delighted. And I don't think that's totally fair, but they are, they're teenagers. So I do think that I would be glad to debate him, and I would be glad to ask him what he was doing in Russia. And if he's supporting an autocratic government on the 4th of July, what are you doing there? So yeah, I'd be glad to talk to him about that. But I would love to get a debate with Jerry Moran because I want to ask him, do you think January 6th is a legitimate political discourse? Yes or no? His party is burning down, and this is another great opportunity for us to win this race. Donald Trump continues to pour gasoline on his own party, which is only good for us. And Jerry Moran is trying to navigate this whole piece. He's got Trump's endorsement right now. Mitch McConnell he likes, so he's trying to walk this. He's, as I like to say, straddling a barbed wire fence, which cannot be comfortable. He is. I'd be glad to debate him, and I'd be glad to ask him that question. I would be shocked if he did a debate with me.
Well, if we have to, we'd be glad to set up sort of one of those empty chair debates.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Put us on the list of likely sponsors.
Okay.
All right. I have a real good comment from Scott Durham. Thank you for speaking about term limits. DC should not be a lifelong career for any politician. I have certainly noticed myself that there's a real change in the discourse on that. It's always been kind of like, well, we want our folks who are elected. They're good, so we want to keep them. It's those other ones. But I think the discourse on that is changing a little bit.
Yeah. Grassley in Iowa is 88 years old and running for re-election again. Seriously, let me just tell you, when I'm 88, I'm going to be doing nothing. So count on that. You can mark that in your book.
Okay. All right. Penny Von Aken has a question. The planet is in an unsustainable downward spiral with the climate crisis and horrific loss of biodiversity. I hope this is a priority for you. Is it?
It absolutely is. And this is one of the areas where we engage the younger generation. The younger generation gets this. They understand it. They're passionate about it. I think leaning into the environment is critical for all of us. I grew up in a church tradition where we're supposed to be stewards of the earth. We're not supposed to, simply use it up and throw it away. It's not disposable. So yes, I think it is big. I do know the lower prairie chicken sparks huge passion in rural communities, because setting aside land for the lower prairie chicken, which I've never met personally. I'm going to confess I've not met the lower prairie chicken, but does spark passion among people as an example of the federal government trying to cost people money. And this is the false dichotomy that has been set up. Of course, we can protect biodiversity in our country and support our farmers. Of course, we can protect the aquifers and sustain the economy in Kansas. The idea that we can't do both is ridiculous, and we need to push back on those. If we're solving problems, of course we can solve these problems. So yes, I'm passionate about the climate and our need to protect it.
Okay, good. Now I have to say Nancy Brune did speak up in favor of those term limits. So I'll read her quote, her chat comment to all. I support everything you said except term limits. We need the good ones, and we need institutional memory. So point noted.
Yep.
Kathleen Harned says, I believe it's important to educate Kansans that Democrats always vote for issues that are good for our citizens, unlike the Republicans who don't vote for issues that support what's good for the people.
And I would say the only thing that, and I'm learning this because this is a process. I agree 100% with that. I think one of the ways we articulate that's better received is to say that the Republican politicians are voting against what's good for people and are giving people bad information. And I think that, and we get further when we criticize the Republican politicians rather than Republican voters. Not that there's not enough blame to go around. I'm just saying that it's better received in communities when we talk about them being misled by their own party officials. I mean, Jerry Moran, for instance, voting for school vouchers, private school vouchers. Well, that's terrific. Of 105 counties, how many counties have a private school? 10, maybe. The whole idea of all he's doing is stoking a voter base that's actually harming Kansas public schools, taking federal money out of Kansas public schools and putting it into private schools so they can win more state championships in sports is not really helping Kansas. And I think that's a piece where we criticize the Republican policies and try not to criticize the voters, though that's hard to do.
Okay. We do have a few people who have spoken up for the prairie chicken.
Oh, it's the lesser prairie chicken. See, look how bad I am. Look, I told you I was a city kid. I wasn't kidding.
Well, your cabinet will have to work on you with that, but it's the lesser
prairie chicken. I feel
which
bad.
Is kind of a gentler. It's a gentler term anyway. But
yeah, thank you.
Okay, next question. The students from Kathleen Harned. Students say they don't trust either party, and if we could get them tuition forgiveness, that might build their trust.
No, I think that's right. You talk about education in Kansas, public education, you talk about K through 16, right? Not just K through 12. You've got to talk about the community colleges. You've got to talk about the universities. We know not every kiddo wants to go to college, but we need to have some kind of training so they can be successful and have a career. And the vocational training, the community colleges are a big part of that. And I think the attack on public education, which is unbelievable, and this whole CRT, critical race theory, is just another iteration of that, right? Of another way to attack public schools. And I think we need to push back on the attack on public schools and the tuition increases in community colleges and universities, particularly under the Brownback administration, of raising the cost of going to college and making it more out of reach, increasing student debt. That's a straight up Republican policy across the country. And we need to talk to our students about trying to make it about how education matters, and that we shouldn't balance the books on the back of students who haven't even started. I have 2 kids. I have 4 kids. One's in graduate school, one's in undergrad, and 2 are in high school. The value of public education is real. And my mom is a public school teacher. I mean, she was NEA. My dad was a union carpenter, put himself through seminary as a carpenter. My mom was a union teacher, public school teacher. Making education unreachable so that only wealthy people can get an education. And then having a student start with $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt. Are you kidding? That's a mortgage payment that you're making coming out. And it hurts here's the part, it hurts our economy. If our young people start in debt and they're paying interest, which is the American way, because the number one note for the federal government is debt service, right? That's the first thing we pay every month. If debt service is becoming your primary focus of education, we've got a problem. And we're not growing our economy. We're not growing our citizenship. We're not growing our cities. We're hurting.
Good. Martha Kaufman asks you, do you have a position on campaign finance reform?
Yes. It's a complete joke. I can tell you, I spend all my time, Monday through Friday, on the phone, calling donors, asking for money. And it's the nature of the way this whole campaign thing is set up. And I can tell you, you'd be surprised to know people don't like getting phone calls to be asked for money. And I have people say, I hate this. I'm like, maybe not as much as I do. We all hate it. Campaign finance reform is essential. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars being poured into races from special interest groups, and making it harder for normal people to run for office. Look, we have plenty of qualified people who are able to run for this office. And one of the reasons I'm the only one running is there aren't a lot of people willing to climb a financial mountain. If you're not independently wealthy and you can fund your own campaign, which newsflash, I am not, and you're not the chosen one of the party or of your race. The Kansas Senate race is classified as a tier C by the DNC. There's A, which is like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. Those are the A tiers. They're going to get $100 million. They're going to raise $100 million each. There's the B tier, like Wisconsin, North Carolina. Those are ones, C tier is Kansas and other small states. And what C means is the cavalry is not coming. They're not going to pour money into this race. And so what you have then is you're doing grassroots organizing, grassroots fundraising, and you're running up against someone who's corporately funded, because Jerry Moran has delivered for the pharmaceutical companies. He has delivered for the Koch brothers. He has delivered over and over again for the special interests. And every vote he casts, he can send out a fundraising email and say, look, I did it again. I hurt the environment again. Give me some more money. So he has a $4 million war chest to start, which in other states would be nothing, but in Kansas, it's a lot. So explanation, no excuses. It's an uphill climb financially, and it's a large part about how we fund campaigns in this country. But it is going to be a slog. It's going to be a financial slog the entire time, which is why my campaign is not going to be able to hire enough people to reach 4,200 voters in Douglas County. It's going to take the volunteers in Douglas County to reach those 4,200 voters, right? We have to deputize you all to do the work, because we're not going to raise $30 million to come in and hire a ton of people to come do our work for us. If we want to win this race, we're going to have to do it grassroots style, and we're going to have to do it one voter contact at a time. So yeah, voter finance reform, election finance reform should be a priority. And I will tell you this, I agree with the institutional knowledge piece in terms of the downside of term limits. I can tell you also the financial landscape of campaigns changes dramatically with term limits in terms of what people are able to raise and the war chest that the incumbents are able to accumulate to defeat any kind of competition.
Good point. Okay, we are, I think we really actually are coming to an end of our questions. Shout out from MJ for public dollars for public schools. followed by Senator Francisco, who notes that it would help a lot for the federal government to pay more of their share of the cost of special education. So a couple of areas to think about and work on.
Well, and I would say this, the Build Back Better, one of the things about Build Back Better that Biden had in it was for the human infrastructure. Why we're not supporting, if you have a special needs child, and I've seen this in my church, I've seen it in my schools, I've seen it in my community. If you have a special needs child with either intellectual, emotional, or physical disabilities, it is a sentence in this country to bankruptcy. It is we simply don't support folks who we should be supporting. And the idea that it's somehow socialism, that we're going to care for folks who need help is crazy, and supporting these families. We're basically taking families out of our economy, and they're spending all their resources just to make it. And it's wrong. And I think there needs to be a moral voice that stands up and says, if we're not taking care of our special needs kids, who are we taking care of? If we're not taking care of adults with intellectual disabilities, who are we taking care of? If we're not taking care of, Jerry Moran boasts about helping veterans, even though the Veterans Administration has been making cut after cut after cut. If we're not taking care of our veterans and not taking care of people with disabilities, who are we taking care of? And then let's start there. And then let's say, and now we have a whole opioid crisis and a whole addiction crisis in our country. And we do not have the infrastructure set up to care for that. These are things that are what I would say grown-up societies do, is we take care of our own people, because there are some folks who are going to need help the rest of their lives, and it's on us to provide it.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark, we've come to the end of our time. I don't know if you have any closing comments. On our end, we'll make a commitment to start working on those 4,200. But I'll let you close it off.
Well, thank you. I won't say too much more. I do want to thank you all for taking some time for coming out. I do want to encourage you to look into the relational organizing, which is based on the phone. It's not, phone calls are important. Door knocking is important. The focus of the phone calls and the door knocking has to be those 4,200 first, but also the relational organizing. We can get you training. There are groups that will train you and volunteers. If you need to reach 4,200 people, if you had 100 people, 100 volunteers, and you have a bunch halfway here on the call, right? If you had 100 volunteers who would put 20 people on there, or 30 people or 40 people on their phone, and help make sure they get to the polls. It's relational organizing. That's a whole nother level of advanced helping getting people there. And it's not, remember, these low propensity voters aren't bad people. It's just not their hobby. It's not what they're interested in. They're not watching the news. So getting tuned into relational organizing is going to be the key to getting that voter turnout. And it's a voter turnout election. We win as Democrats in Kansas in non-presidential cycle low turnout pieces when our Democrats outpace the turnout of everyone else. That's what's got to happen for us to win. So I just want to end with that encouragement. I want to thank you for your time. I also would make an appeal. If you're in a position to make a financial contribution to the campaign, we need it. If you know others who are able to do that as well, please let them know. The maximum contribution is $2,900. It's an unpopular number for some reason, but it is the maximum contribution. But the help is needed, and we have a great opportunity. We also have a great slate of Democrats. Laura Kelly is amazing. Sharice Davids is amazing. Patrick Schmidt's a strong candidate. We have Chris Mann's a great candidate. I mean, we have Lynn Rogers. I mean, we have a great slate of Democrats, probably the strongest slate of Democrats across the board as we've ever had. Let's go win some elections statewide in Kansas. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Folks, we will see you at our next happy hour, March 7th. Virtually, and we'll see you in person, March 19th. Well, we will be doing the Saturday seminar back in the Lawrence Arts Center. And we will also still stream. So if streaming works better for you, that's possible, but we surely will enjoy seeing all the members of our Democratic community that we can on March 19th. Been a long time. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.
Thanks to all you Democrats, all us Democrats.
That's right. Bye-bye.
Good night. Goodbye. Not good night. Goodbye.